The AWS Command Line Interface, or CLI, is a unified tool to interact with different AWS resources from a command line. Although it's certainly possible that you might use the CLI manually in your own terminal, most developers find the CLI useful when writing shell scripts. Being able to execute commands in AWS with a simple script isn't just a time saver, but also increases the ways you can use AWS. For instance, automated build systems can run shell scripts that deploy built application artifacts to the cloud, creating a simple but powerful continuous deployment pipeline. Because the AWS CLI is a unified tool, you can interact with almost any service. When executing a command, you type AWS to run the CLI itself. The next argument is the service that you want to do something with. And beyond that is the specific command and any flags or parameters for the command. Here is the documentation for what services you can interact with using the CLI, and you can see that almost any service is accessible. Installation of the AWS CLI is simple and straightforward. With Windows, there's an installer to download, or with Mac or Linux, you'll use the Python package manager pip to install the CLI. Once installed, you'll need to do an initial configuration which involves adding an access key, secret key, and default region. You can add or remove access keys from the security credentials menu in the console. And once those have been configured, you can start using the CLI to interact with the services in your account. Now let's try it out. I wanted to replicate the example from the last clip where we sent an item to a DynamoDB table. So we'll start by entering the AWS command. Next will be the service we want to use, which is DynamoDB. Since we want to put an item into our table, we'll use the put_item command, then the -- table name flag, followed by the table name. The last parameter we'll add is the flag for item and our item in JSON format. If we run this command, it should execute smoothly. We can check our DynamoDB table and see that the item was successfully added, just like with our SDK before. You can probably imagine one of the differences with the CLI and the SDK is that it can be easier to do things dynamically in code. A way to add a dynamic nature to your command line is with shell scripts, and that's really where the AWS CLI is probably used more than manually. I built a short, simple shell script that puts some more items in our DynamoDB table. You can see each command is simply running the AWS CLI. Nothing is different. I can run that shell script from my terminal like so, and it will execute both AWS CLI commands and put the items in my Dynamo table, as we can see. The CLI is great for doing things quickly with little overhead, or for automation tasks in shell scripts. Since the level of interaction roughly matches the SDKs and web console, there's not much you can't do with the AWS CLI.